famous one-off Class 26 locomotive, known far and wide as the Red Devil, due to the all-over buffer beam scarlet livery in which it first saw the light of day, is seen here in action on the Kimberley de Aar main line near Klokfontein. This unique engine formed the last class of steam locomotive to be introduced into service by the then South African Railways in 1981, and was, at that time, undoubtedly the most modern, sophisticated and efficient of its kind the world had ever seen. In this video, we set out to tell the interesting story of the background, development and achievements of this singular engine. And to start the tale, we need to go back in time to the early 1950s and the introduction of another famous class of steam motive power in the form of two variants of the Class 25. The Class 25 was produced in two variants, the condensing and non-condensing subclasses, designated Class 25 and 25NC respectively. To fulfill a need for additional motive power for the arid Karoo sections of the South African main north-south line, 90 condensing and 50 non-condensing variants of the new class of locomotive were ordered in the early 1950s. These 484 engines were supplied by both the Henschel and North British Locomotive Works between 1953 and 1955. Initially, the free exhausting 25 NCs operated between Kimberley and de Aar, later extending this territory south as far as Beaufort West and north as far as Clarksville, while the condensing engines initially worked the Toos River de Aar section, over which acute shortages of suitable water were experienced, especially during the winter months when special water trains had to be run to supply the railway's needs. This footage, taken in June of 1996, follows Class 25 NC number 3410 working a safari train southwards between Springfontein and Colesberg. A mid-afternoon departure in blustery conditions sees 3410 lifting its train away from Springfontein. These fine locos, one of which was used as the basis for the construction of the Class 26, were the most powerful non-articulated steam engines to operate anywhere in the world on a rail gauge of less than 4 foot 8.5 inches prior to the advent of the 26. They developed a tractive effort of 45,360 pounds at 75% boiler pressure and had an enormous 70 square foot fire grate fed by an automatic stoker, which was fortunate for the footplate crew. Several features new to South African railways were incorporated in their design, including roller bearings throughout and a one-piece cast steel mainframe, which includes the cylinders. The tenders provided with these engines were, at the time, the largest conventional units in service with a 32-foot wheelbase and a capacity of 18 tons of coal and 10,500 gallons of water. A total of 50 25 NCs went into service. The 11, numbered from 3401 to 3411, coming from North British, and the balance of 39, numbered 3412 to 3450, were supplied from Henschel. The locomotive 3410 in action here is a North British product. The 90 units of condensing variant of the basic class 25, an example of which preserved the number 3511 is seen here, were built and introduced simultaneously with the non-condensers. Henschel provided class leader number 3451 and North British the remaining 89 locos. These giants were, in all respects other than the condensing equipment, identical to their counterparts, but due to the additional equipment, weighed in at 234 tons and measured some 117.5 feet buffer to buffer, and their special tender had a wheelbase of 46 feet. It is interesting to note that the earlier tender engines of classes 6, 7 and 8 measured a total overall length between 50 and 55 feet. In condensing locomotives, instead of letting the steam escape through a blast pipe and out the chimney, it is drawn through a large diameter pipe and circulated through the air-cooled condensing radiators in the tender. The necessary flow is achieved by the draft provided by 5 steam-driven fans mounted horizontally in the top of the tender, which requires some 550 horsepower to operate. The condensate is collected in a small reservoir before being reused, providing 60 to 65% reduction in water usage. Under optimum conditions, these engines could run some 1,000 kilometers between water stops, although crews always topped up whenever possible. This efficiency of water utilization soon earned them the nickname Kamele, Afrikaans for camels, by their crews. Since the exhaust steam does not pass out the stack, a steam-driven fan mounted below the chimney is necessary to induce the required draft for the firebox. This fan is protected by deflector plates, since the char in the flue gases initially caused excessive wear on its blades. The char now collects at the bottom of the banjo-shaped smokebox extension, from where it is discharged by a steam ejector pipe exhausting immediately in front of the chimney. It is the drafting fan that gives the locomotive its distinctive sound when running, a whine more akin to a jet aircraft than a steam engine. And also, since there is no steam exhausting, the loco has no exhaust beat as one hears with conventional engines. Undeniably water efficient, the condensers were nonetheless never popular with the crews of the day, with the fine char constantly blowing into the cab, making them dirty engines to work on, and also maintenance was frequent and costly. Number 3511 is seen here leaving Modderrivier in July 1991 with a freight destined for De Aar. The spread of electrification and dieselization over the routes for which the condensing engines were specifically designed resulted in their displacement to other regions where water availability was less of a problem, and so, in the mid-70s, it was decided to remove the complex condensing equipment. All but 3 of the condensing engines were converted to non-condensers in rebuilds carried out mainly at Salt River Works between 1974 and 1981. Although the R and Beaconsfield running sheds each undertook one conversion during the same period. In the course of these rebuilds, it was not feasible to shorten the tenders due to the original mainframe being a one-piece steel casting. As a result, the final conversion featured a long, ungainly round-topped water tank affixed to the original coal bunker, the appearance which led to the nickname Worshonde, meaning sausage dogs. Here engine number 3481 makes a fine sight in the late afternoon sun on the main line between Henningness Kloof and Kibberley with a freight load. Prior to 1970, South African railways had maintained a sensible policy of relying on steam locomotives, burning locally mined coal on most routes in the country. Indeed, at that time, some 85% of the organization's motive power on non-electrified lines was using this source of energy. However, in the mid-1970s, the beleaguered South African government, eager to encourage American investment in the country, took to entering into contracts and placing large orders for diesel locomotives with both General Motors and General Electric as part of a deal that saw both firms establish large production facilities locally. These contracts guaranteed minimum annual purchase levels from both manufacturers for many years to come. Coinciding with the signing of these deals, the world was hit by the start of the first oil crisis that caused both supply problems and huge price increases throughout the 70s and early 80s. In South Africa, these problems were compounded by United Nations sanctions and an oil embargo against the country, which turned out to be grossly inefficient. Some engineers with the railway organization argued that from a strategic point of view, it would make sense to hold to the policy of using and even upgrading the existing steam fleet, dependent as it was on a readily available local fuel source. However, the South African railway management continued to press forward with the dieselization, so that by 1980, nearly 30% of the units owned by the organization were reliant on imported fuel. David Wardale, an engineer with the South African Railways, had been pushing the idea of looking at the principles and experiments of the Argentinian engineer L.D. Porta, and during 1977-78 he advanced a number of suggested improvements to improve the steaming rate, efficiency and power output of locomotives still in service with the railway. Having convinced at least some of the SAR hierarchy that upgrades of existing steam classes might be worth looking at, he was given the go-ahead to turn theory into fact on a member of the 19D class. Southern Africa's primary branch line workhorse for over 60 years were the family of 19-class locomotives. The development, which reached its zenith with the 19D series, built in batches between 1937 and 1948 by various manufacturers, and totaling no less than 235 locomotives. It was a member of this class, as seen here, already recognized as one of the most efficient workhorses of the SAR, that management allowed Wardale to modify as a test case for his ideas. When 19D, number 2644, a loco with a reputation for being a poor steamer, was shopped at Beaconsfield in early 1979, during the normal course of service, SAR management gave permission for it to be modified in line with Wardale's ideas. In June 1979, she reappeared from the works in modified form, with Eastern European type smoke deflectors, Lemper double exhaust stacks, and a gas producer firebox. After much in-service testing and a number of modifications to the gas producer firebox, 2644 became a consistently good steamer, and the administration was sufficiently impressed to allow Wardale to extend his experiments. After initially working on the Beaconsfield to R and Belbin Douglas routes whilst under test, this engine spent the major part of its service life based at Mafeking Shed, hauling up to 23% more load than her unmodified sister 19Ds. 1984 saw the end of the 19D class allocation to Mafeking Shed, all being replaced by 25 NC locos. Fortunately, 2644 has survived into preservation and is currently out of use at Sanrasm at Krugersdorp. The success of the modifications to the 19D number 2644 convinced the SAR administration that Wardale's ideas, based on the principles of L.D. Porter, were worth pursuing further, and consequently he was given the go-ahead in September 1979 to prepare plans for similar but even more advanced modifications to a member of the 25 class. The last built of the original 25 NCs, number 3450, based at Beaconsfield, was due for a major overhaul at Salt River Works in Cape Town during late 1980. But this particular locomotive was selected for the next stage of the experimental program. When outshopped from Salt River in February 1981, the rebuilt, reclassified Class 26 undertook 2 test runs locally and then immediately left for Capital Park in Pretoria, both for tune-ups and trials on the Witbank line under the supervision of David Wardale. Tests on freight trains showed savings of 30% on coal and water usage and increased drawbar power of 43% over normal 25 NCs. At the end of 1981, the 26 returned to its home depot at Beaconsfield for a successful stint in regular service. During this period, the engine also underwent a number of further tests and modifications before the SAR management put an end to the program in 1985. When the impressive Class 26 emerged from Salt River workshops in 1981, the following major modifications were evident. Several changes were made to the firebox as follows. The volume was increased by lowering the grate as much as possible, and the pinhole fire bars were limited to 5% airspace, thus restricting the primary air supply to about 30 to 50% of combustion air. This reduced the serious loss of coal particles out the exhaust from the firebed, which occurred in conventional locomotives during operation. Saturated steam was also led under the grate to cool the fire, the objective being to retard clinker formation, which increases coal burning efficiency and thus the calorific value of the coal. The rebuild included a gas producer combustion system which basically relies on the gasification of coal on a low temperature firebed, resulting from the greatly restricted primary air supply already mentioned. The released gases are then fully burned above the firebed in secondary air introduced via air intakes made through the firebox water jacket. 7 intakes are located on each side of the firebox, as clearly seen here. The 3450 is fitted with a double Lamper exhaust which induces a greater flow of combustion gas through the fire and boiler tubes. The 2 exhaust chimneys are arranged longitudinally and angled in a V configuration to accommodate a feed water heater, utilizing exhaust steam between them. In practice, the feed water heating system was found to be troublesome and unreliable, and when 3450 was involved in a collision at Bloemfontein in October 1984, causing considerable front-end damage, the locomotive was repaired and returned to service, but minus the feed water heater as seen here. The smoke box was lengthened to accommodate the new exhaust arrangement. Its internal design was improved using aerodynamic principles to increase exhaust gas flow. A larger superheater was installed by removing the standard unit and replacing it with a slightly modified GMA header casting, increasing the number of elements from 40 to 50. These additional elements raised the final steam temperature from 380 degrees centigrade, as on a Class 25 NC, to about 450 degrees centigrade on the rebuild. An installed superheat booster operating at lower speeds reduces heat flow down the narrow boiler elements while simultaneously diverting a greater flow of hot gases through the superheater element pipes, thus providing a constant superheat temperature at all operating speeds. To allow for the increase in steam temperatures, lubrication to the valve liners is greatly improved. To reduce friction and wear, the liners are made from very hard chrome-plated cast iron and also redesigned with large streamlined ports to the cylinders. The steam circuit is made more efficient with the use of, firstly, new steam pipes for improved steam flow and reduced pressure drop. Secondly, larger steam chests incorporating new multi-ring long-lap piston valves. Thirdly, new improved pistons with better valve and piston packing. Fourthly, Walshart's valve gear dimensions and tuning optimized using computer technology. And fifthly, Herdner's starting valves are fitted to try and overcome starting difficulties at restricted cutoff. The external appearance was also altered substantially by fitting a front fall plate and raising the running plates. Initially, small Witte-type smoke deflectors, as found on modern European steam locomotives, were fitted. But in September 1982, when the first major service became due, the Witte smoke deflectors were replaced by full-length Wagner-type deflectors to improve exhaust lifting. 3450 appeared in a distinctive buffer beam red livery with a single white line running along the running plate valence and continuing through the cab and tender. The objective of the bright red livery was to make the locomotive stand out and command attention. Although officially named L.D. Porta after the Argentinian engineer who inspired the conversion, the locomotive is commonly known as the Red Devil, a name originating from the erecting shop staff at Salt River Workshops. In September 1985, the Red Devil was proclaimed a prestige locomotive for use on special and tourist trains, and since being withdrawn from regular service, a number of the original Wardale modifications have been removed over time and replaced by standard Class 25 parts. Also during this era, the engine carried several different color schemes. For instance, it was completely black at a stage, or painted black and red, as seen here at the Orange River in 1988-89, and more recently in scarlet without the white stripe along its side, as seen later in this documentary. At sunrise on a cold winter's morning, we enjoy the Red Devil on the De Aar Kimberley main line as it takes the stiff climb out of De Aar in the direction of Beershoek with a Union Limited special train in June 1999. In August 1999, the Red Devil, by now part of the Transnet Heritage Foundation preserved fleet of steam locomotives, was transferred to the Dalyusafat shed, there based in the Western Cape, and became a popular performer on rail tours and day trips. Here we see this locomotive on its first major run in the Western Cape, hauling a charity train from Cape Town to Worcester on the 5th of September 1999. 3450 is seen on the last day of the Union Limited rail tour in mid-September 1999, making an impressive early morning departure from Worcester on its run back to Cape Town. The Red Devil leaving Wellington against the glorious backdrop of the snow-capped Slanghoek Mountains as she heads for Worcester on the first day of a Union Limited tour in July 2000. On the second day of the tour, 3450 makes an early departure from Worcester on its way to Beaufort West, where it will make an overnight stop. At the Durban station, the tour train gets the assistance of 2 electric units for its run up through the Hex River tunnel system, where steam is not permitted to work. The vintage Class 5E units also have various service and supply vehicles in tow for the 26. The Red Devil had not been steaming well, and the electrics continued to provide assistance. At daybreak on the third morning of the tour, 3450 makes a spirited departure from Beaufort West. At Acacia Siding, the main line converges from a double to a single line, and here we see the Red Devil entering the single line section on its northbound journey to the R, whilst making a spectacular scene as it steams into the rising sun. The final section of our story deals with the last of the family of modified locos, Class 25 NC number 3454. (3454) is picked up here at Modderrivier Station in the early afternoon of the 2nd of August 1991, on the point of departure with a southbound Orange Express working. In 1984, this former condensing loco was subject to some modifications to its drafting arrangements while undergoing heavy maintenance at its home base at Beaconsfield. 3454 received a much simpler version of the changes applied to the Class 26 as a further attempt to increase efficiency, but at a much lower cost. A double Lempore exhaust system was installed using similar nozzle clusters as those on the Red Devil, but mounted side by side and vertical rather than inclined, saving on the necessity of having to extend the smoke box. Coupled with these changes, extended smoke deflector a la the Class 26 were fitted. These deflectors were painted peacock blue, whilst the rest of the loco initially carried a very dark, barely discernible blue paint scheme. When 3454 was outshopped in February 1985, she carried the name of one of the Beaconsfield assistant foremen, B.I. Ebbing. This engine now forms part of the Transnet heritage fleet of preserved locomotives and is still active, being used for various steam specials and tour trains.